AITA for cutting my wife off from assets. Technically my wife and I are still married. We have been separated for almost a year, but neither of us has filed for divorce yet. Last spring when COVID first got bad, both of my adult children lost their jobs and could not make rent, so I offered for them to stay with us until they got back on their feet. This caused a lot of stress for everyone involved. I work 45-50 hours a week in a manufacturing job while my wife has not worked in nearly a decade. This was completely her choice as she has never liked working. Who does? And she wanted to pursue making income on Etsy and other similar sites. So when my son and daughter came to stay with us, our house became much more crowded than usual. Since my wife stays at home all day, she felt that my children were invading her space and wanted them out pretty much immediately. She felt I was enabling them by letting them come stay with us and that we should let them sink or swim on their own. I told her that I could not let my children suffer when I was in a position to help. After only a few weeks, shit hit the fan. My wife had blown up at both my son and daughter because she felt they were not pulling their weight in our house. She started giving them chore lists and would get angry when all of the things were not done. My kids were both looking for work and dealing with unemployment offices, and doing housework took a backseat to those things. Rightfully so in my mind. I came home from work one day to my wife screaming like a banshee at my son. When I walked in, my wife immediately turned her ire to me and told me that if I did not kick my kids out right away then she was leaving. So I told her my kids were staying and she packed her stuff and called her sister to pick her up. Wife also does not drive. Since then we have barely spoken. She would not answer my calls and will respond to pretty much every text with "unless your kids are gone." We have nothing to talk about. Mind you, my daughter moved out during the winter after finding a new job, and my son has been working part-time for 6 months while looking for full-time work and saving money to move out. My wife did not even tell me when her dad passed away earlier this year. I had to find out on Facebook. When I tried to call her, she would not answer and ignored all my texts too. Since it has become painfully obvious to me that this relationship is over, I decided to finally file for divorce. However, as soon as my wife was served the papers, she flipped out on me. She is pissed that I cut off her access to our shared checking account and pissed that she will no longer have access to health insurance through my employer. She has called me an asshole more times than I can count, and her siblings have joined the choir on that refrain now too. I do feel bad that this is going to make her life more difficult, but I no longer feel it is my obligation to provide for her when she clearly wants nothing to do with me. So, not weighing on at the moment, but the first thing that came to mind is whether you consulted a lawyer about whether what you are doing is legal. Because if you've only just filed for divorce, but it isn't settled yet, then presumably the separation of marital assets hasn't been established in court yet. So unilaterally cutting of access to accounts seems like something you should run by a lawyer, and I mean an actual lawyer, not like our legal advice. It probably is not legal to cut her off from a joint account, even assuming the bank would allow it to happen without permission from both account holders. However, there is nothing to stop him from transferring his direct deposit or checks from his work to another account or bank. Edit assuming that this is under use law. Actually, even transferring his stuff to another account could run afoul of local laws. They might consider the termination of the marriage to be the day the final papers are signed. So the advice to check that everything is legally handled is still sound. NTA, but you should know that depending on how long you were married, you might owe her a division of that account and ongoing alimony since she was financially dependent for so long. But more so you than your wife. Things you left out of the OP. Your wife did not feel like she had less space. You unilaterally got rid of her crafting room and someone was in the living room the whole time. In fact, you do not seem to think it is you and your wife's house. You seem to think it is just yours and she gets no say because she does not work. You said your kids cooked at least one meal a week. That leaves her on all the others. If she is still cooking twice as much 5 days a week, it is reasonable for her to ask for help with the other chores she normally does herself. Like, he'd be pissed as heck if I lost my personal space and my workload increased and my husband thought it did not matter. Like holy shit, I get that you are frustrated because she does not work, but if her not working was a deal breaker you should have called it off way earlier. You cannot just decide that you working and her not means you get to make all of the V decisions, because that is not a relationship. I am not 100% sure if this tells the complete story. I am a bit concerned that all the comments immediately jump to the conclusion that the wife is a leech, and I feel a bit more information may be needed. The steps she has taken immediately to when the children moved in seem a bit drastic to just have been taken out of nowhere. If you two have been married for a long time or even a certain time and she has been living with you, your house has become her home. By that I do not mean that she owns it or anything like that, but it may have become her home, her refuge. And if then suddenly one partner, without discussing it with the other person, invites 2 more people into the house, never mind the relation, it can be very intrusive, especially if then someone needs to pick up after them or take care of their needs as well. As you seem to have a pretty taxing job, I did wager that it is not necessarily you taking on these extra tasks, no blame. Just that this may be a factor. I definitely do not think you are tough for letting your children stay with you. I think that any parent would do the same, but you may perhaps be a little tough for how this situation was handled with your wife. Edit. After reading your comments, I think that you show complete disregard for your wife in this entire situation. So in my opinion, YTA for freezing her assets. You are not tough for letting your kids stay with you or wanting to help them, but YTA for how you went about it. I am fed up with cleaning up after your grown children who cannot be bothered to lift a finger vibe here. Job hunting and dealing with unemployment do not require 16 hours of effort every day. When my laid-off daughter was looking for work and dealing with unemployment, she took on full responsibility for meals, did half the yard work, and still had plenty of time to watch Netflix and have Facebook chats with her friends. ESH, you need to go through the proper steps for a divorce. Can't just unilaterally decide to take away her access to shared assets. She is an asshole for trying to kick out your kids, though I am wondering if she was the one who was having to do all the extra cooking and cleaning you claim they were too busy to do. ESH, I think many people missed the fact I did initially that these are not her kids and you suddenly moved adults strangers if they are not close into her personal space, which is less than spacious. How many people would be fine with that? Did you consult her? If not, why not? If yes, for how long were they supposed to stay? Also, they did not do the chores properly but you excuse them anyway. Are not they adults? Are you saying they are incapable of doing both chores and looking for work? So many people manage this, yet strangely your kids cannot. Not saying they did not need help, that is why she is a not too, but you are presenting your own pav and you still look like a not. You try to present her as lazy and crazy, but I did like to see her side of the coin. Also, for your own good, I hope you consulted a lawyer before cutting funds. Edit. After seeing his replies. Judges do not like spouses that run off with all of the marital assets. I think you are in for a rude awakening, as your ex is likely going to be entitled to alimony. Your story has some big holes in it. If she is an online seller, then she has an income, and is not necessarily just an unemployed leech like you are painting her to be. It is not crazy to ask people that are getting free rent to help around the house. She is not a servant. Are these kids looking for work 24 hours a day? Really? People with jobs and obligations still have to do chores. Good luck. If I were your wife, I did be talking to the meanest lawyer I could find right now. You are being completely patient and sympathizing with your unemployed, 30-something kids, but aren't showing any of the same feelings for the woman that you agreed to partner in your life and home with. You have no problem with your kids doing less than the bare minimum in helping to maintain what sounds like a very cramped home, but seem to expect your wife to be their maid and to have no say in how chores are allotted or anything else. You are acting like cleaning kitty litter or helping to keep a garden tidy is so harsh and unfair. LOLQ angry misunderstood teenager trope. For no other reason than cutting off health insurance to someone who is diabetic and anemic in the pandemic before finalizing the divorce. Huge asshole move. Oh, and leaving out so much information in the original post that people had to go on a scavenger hunt in the comments to get the full truth out of you. In my opinion, your children are grown-ass adults. If they are not picking up after themselves, even if they are looking for work, it is going to strain anyone. I do not care how long you are looking, it is all online and you are home all day. Pick up the ducking house. It does not matter that your wife has essentially been a stay-at-home for over a decade. You agreed to that. She wanted them out and was tired of their mess. It is her house too. I did call you an asshole too. I feel like the information provided about your wife was intended to paint her in a negative light, but really all it tells me is you have screwed her even harder and harder, knowing she has not worked in a decade and knowing she would not have health insurance. I do not care how many times I get downvoted for this opinion. People want marriage to mean something. Then make it mean something. Kids, grow up and leave the house. Your spouse is supposed to be with you until you die. You pick your kids hands down when they are children, but when they are adults, yeah, pick your spouse. Your kids ain't gonna be there for you when you are 70 and you are ugly and no one wants to talk to you except for the other old ducker next to you. Please subscribe.